The autumn light streamed through the gallery windows, casting long shadows across Catherine's latest work, a haunting portrait of intertwined hands reaching through darkness. She stepped back, brush still poised, when she felt Michael's presence behind her. His cologne, subtle yet distinctive, announced him before his words did. "Breathtaking," he murmured, his breath warm against her neck. "Just like its creator." Catherine suppressed a smile, trying to maintain her professional demeanor despite the flutter in her stomach. At 32, she'd thought herself past such schoolgirl reactions, but Michael Lambert had a way of unraveling her composure with just a word or gesture. As owner of one of Manhattan's most prestigious contemporary art galleries, he could have his pick of artists, and women. Yet for the past 6 months, he'd chosen her for both roles. "The opening's in 3 weeks, she said, turning to face him. "Are you sure the space will be ready?" The question was professional, but her eyes lingered on his face, the sharp jawline, the subtle creases around his eyes that deepened when he smiled. "Trust me," Michael replied, pulling her close. His charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, felt expensive under her paint-stained fingers. "Everything's falling into place exactly as planned." If Catherine had known then how those words would come back to haunt her, she might have run right there and then. But love has a way of blinding even the most perceptive eyes. The next week passed in a blur of preparation and stolen moments. Michael's gallery, Lumiere Contemporary, had become her second home. During the day, she worked alongside his staff, preparing for what would be her first major solo exhibition. At night, they would often stay late, sharing wine and dreams in his office overlooking the city lights. It was during one such evening that the first crack appeared in their perfect facade. Catherine was updating the exhibition catalog on Michael's computer when a message notification popped up. She wouldn't have given it a second glance, except for 2 words that caught her eye: wedding planner. The email preview was brief but clear: "Dear Mr. Lambert, regarding your upcoming wedding to Ms. Sophie Winters, I've attached the revised specifications for." Catherine felt the room tilt. The wine glass in her hand slipped, shattering against the hardwood floor. Red liquid spread like blood across the expensive wood. "Cat." Michael's voice came from the doorway. "What happened? Are you okay?" She turned to him, her hands trembling. "Who's Sophie Winters?" The change in his expression was subtle, a tightening around the eyes, a slight clench of his jaw, but Catherine had spent countless hours studying his face, both as an artist and a lover. She knew guilt when she saw it. "It's not what you think," he said, stepping forward, hands raised placatingly. "Sophie's family has been instrumental in the gallery's success. The engagement, it's purely business." "Business?" Catherine's voice cracked. "You're engaged to another woman, and you call it business?" "Let me explain." Michael moved closer, his voice taking on that smooth, persuasive tone she'd always found so charming. Now it made her skin crawl. "The Winters family has been pressuring me. They're my biggest investors. Sophie's father threatened to pull out if I didn't agree to the engagement. It's just temporary, until I can secure alternative funding." Catherine backed away, her mind racing through every moment they'd shared. How many had been real? How many had been calculated moves in whatever game he was playing? "How long?" she demanded. "How long have you been engaged?" Michael's silence was answer enough. "The engagement predated their relationship." "I was going to tell you," he said finally. "I've been trying to find the right moment. But you have to understand my position. The gallery, your exhibition, everything depends on maintaining certain appearances." "Appearances?" Catherine laughed bitterly. "Well, I wouldn't want to damage those. Don't worry, I'll maintain them perfectly. As far as anyone knows, I'm just another artist you're mentoring. Nothing more." She grabbed her coat and bag, heading for the door. Michael caught her arm. "Cat, please. I love you. This thing with Sophie, it's just paper. It's not real." Catherine jerked away. No, Michael. The paper's real. The ring on her finger is real. The only thing that isn't real is what I thought we had. She fled into the night, her heels clicking against the sidewalk as she fought back tears. Behind her, the gallery's lights glowed warmly, a beacon of everything she'd thought she'd found, and everything she'd just lost. But fate wasn't finished with Catherine and Michael. The real drama was just beginning, and Sophie Winters would prove to be far more than just a name on a wedding planner's email. The web of lies, love, and ambition was about to draw tighter, and Catherine would soon discover that in the world of high art and higher stakes, nothing, and no one, was quite what they seemed. 3 days after discovering Michael's engagement, Catherine found herself at the Whitney Museum's annual fundraising gala. She hadn't planned to attend, but her agent insisted it was career suicide to skip Manhattan's premier art event of the season. So here she was, wrapped in a borrowed midnight blue gown, clutching a champagne flute like a shield. The grand ballroom sparkled with wealth and privilege. Crystal chandeliers cast their glow over New York's elite as they moved through their practiced social dance of air kisses and calculated compliments. Catherine felt like an imposter among them, even before she caught sight of Michael across the room. He looked devastating in his tuxedo, but it was the woman on his arm that made Catherine's breath catch. Sophie Winters was everything Catherine wasn't, old money polished to a gleaming shine. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant chignon, her emerald gown likely cost more than Catherine's entire wardrobe, and the engagement ring on her finger caught the light like a small sun. Quite the power couple, aren't they? A man's voice startled Catherine from her thoughts. She turned to find an older gentleman studying her with knowing eyes. Thomas Blackwood, he introduced himself. Art critic for the Times. Catherine Chen, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm an artist. Ah yes, the upcoming exhibition at Lumiere Contemporary. Michael speaks highly of your work. Thomas's gaze was shrewd. Though I wonder if he's quite as invested in your artistic development now that his engagement is public. Before Catherine could respond, a ripple went through the crowd. Sophie Winters was making her way toward them, Michael trailing in her wake like a well-trained pet. Mr. Blackwood, Sophie's voice dripped honey and venom in equal measure. I hope you'll be covering our wedding for the society pages. It's going to be the event of the season. Her eyes slid to Catherine. And you must be the artist Michael's been mentoring. He's so good about supporting emerging talent. Catherine felt each word like a perfectly aimed dart. Yes, Michael's been very supportive. Though I wasn't aware of all the ways he spreads his support around. Sophie's smile never wavered, but her eyes hardened. Michael, darling, why don't you get us some champagne? Once he was gone, she stepped closer to Catherine. Let me be clear. Michael and I have been engaged for over a year. Our families have been planning this marriage, since we were in college. Whatever little dalliance you think you had with him, it's over. Is that why you're marking your territory so publicly? Catherine kept her voice low. Because you're so secure in your relationship? Oh, sweetheart. Sophie laughed, the sound like breaking glass. I'm doing this as a courtesy. Michael will always choose the life I represent, the connections, the money, the social standing. Did you really think he'd throw all that away for an unknown artist with a trust fund sob story? The words hit home with devastating accuracy. Catherine had told Michael about her parents' deaths, about growing up with a grandfather who believed art was a waste of time. She'd shared her most vulnerable moments, and he'd clearly shared them with his fiancée. Ladies. Michael returned with the champagne, his expression carefully neutral. I trust you're getting acquainted. Wonderfully, Sophie purred, taking her glass. I was just telling Catherine how excited I am about her exhibition. In fact. She paused for effect. Daddy and I would love to sponsor it. As a wedding present to you, darling. We could announce it tonight. Catherine watched Michael's face. This was his moment to prove Sophie wrong, to show that their relationship meant more than social climbing and business deals. Instead, she saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he weighed the opportunity against everything else. "That's very generous, Sophie," he said finally. "Catherine, this could take your show to another level." The betrayal was complete. Catherine set down her untouched champagne. "Thank you for the offer, but I prefer to succeed or fail on my own merit. If you'll excuse me." She made it to the coat check before Michael caught up with her. "Cat, wait. You don't understand what's at stake here." "I understand perfectly." She turned to face him. "You're not trapped in this engagement, Michael. You're exactly where you want to be. Sophie's right, you'll always choose that world over anything real. It's not that simple." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration breaking through his polished facade. "The gallery's in trouble. Sophie's father could save it, but he's threatening to pull all support unless the wedding happens. Everything I've built, everything I could offer you, it all depends on this marriage." "Offer me?" Catherine stared at him in disbelief. "Were you planning to keep me as your mistress after the wedding? Is that the deal?" "I love you," he said desperately. "Give me time to figure this out. Please." For a moment, Catherine wavered. Then she remembered Sophie's words, the casual way she'd wielded Catherine's private pain as a weapon. "Love without trust isn't love at all. It's just another transaction." She stepped into the cold November night, leaving Michael in the warm glow of his gilded cage. But as her taxi pulled away from the curb, she saw him watching her from the steps of the museum. The look on his face would haunt her dreams, a mixture of longing and resignation that suggested their story wasn't over yet. What Catherine didn't know was that Michael had already set in motion events that would force them all to confront the true price of their choices. Sophie's triumphant smile that night would soon fade as she discovered that in the game of love and power, even the surest bets could go terribly wrong. The art studio Catherine had rented in Brooklyn became her sanctuary in the weeks following the gala. She threw herself into her work, channeling her pain into a new series of paintings that were darker and more visceral than anything she'd created before. The exhibition at Lumiere was 6 weeks away, but she couldn't bring herself to step foot in the gallery. Her agent handled all the arrangements. She was working late one evening, lost in a particularly intense piece, a woman drowning in a sea of golden chains, when a voice broke her concentration. "That's powerful stuff." A man stood in her doorway, camera hanging around his neck. "Sorry to intrude. I'm doing a piece on Brooklyn artists for the Village Voice." Your light was on, and the door was open. Catherine realized she'd forgotten to lock up again. "I'm not really doing interviews right now." "Not an interview," he said, stepping inside despite her protest. "Just a conversation between artists. I'm Jason Reed." He studied her painting with genuine interest. "You're working through something heavy here." She should have asked him to leave. Instead, she found herself talking, about art, about transformation, about the way pain could be beautiful if you captured it just right. She carefully avoided mentioning Michael or the gallery, but Jason seemed to read between the lines. "Let me guess," he said, settling onto a paint-splattered stool. "Someone in the art world showed their true colors. Happens more often than not in this business." "Speaking from experience." "Let's just say I learned the hard way that some people view artists as commodities rather than humans." He raised his camera. "Mind if I capture some of your process? The lighting in here is incredible." Before Catherine could answer, her phone buzzed. Michael's name flashed on the screen, the 12th call this week. She declined it with trembling fingers. Jason lowered his camera. "Bad timing. Bad everything." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "Sorry, I shouldn't dash." "Hey, no apologies needed." He pulled out a business card. "Look, I'm having a gallery showing next week. Small space, real people, no pretense. Come by if you want to remember why you fell in love with art in the first place." After he left, Catherine found herself looking up his work online. His photographs were raw and honest, street scenes, forgotten corners of the city, moments of unexpected beauty in the midst of decay. They spoke to something in her that had been drowning in the polished world of Lumière contemporary. She went to his showing. The gallery was a converted warehouse in Bushwick, nothing like the sleek spaces she'd grown used to. The crowd was younger, dressed in vintage and denim rather than designer labels. Jason's photographs lined the brick walls, interspersed with works by other local artists. "You came," Jason said, appearing beside her with 2 plastic cups of wine. "What do you think? Too gritty for your tastes?" "It's real," she replied, surprising herself with her honesty. "Everything here feels real." They talked for hours that night, about art and authenticity, about selling out versus survival. Jason told her about turning down a lucrative commercial photography career to pursue his own vision. Catherine found herself opening up about her upcoming exhibition and her fears about being back in that world. "Come to my studio tomorrow," he suggested. "I've got some contacts at independent galleries. People who care more about the art than the scene." The offer was tempting, a potential escape route from her commitment to Lumière. But something held her back. "I can't just walk away from the exhibition. Too many people have invested time and money." "Sounds like someone else has invested more than money," Jason observed quietly. Catherine started to deny it, but at that moment her phone lit up with a text from Michael: "Please come to the gallery tomorrow. We need to talk about the exhibition. Things have changed." "Complicated," she said finally, showing Jason the message. "Life usually is." He took her phone gently and typed in his number. "But you don't have to figure it out alone." That night, lying in bed, Catherine found herself at a crossroads. Jason represented everything she'd originally loved about art: the passion, the authenticity, the freedom to create without compromise. But thoughts of Michael still haunted her. Even now, she could feel the pull of their connection, the tangled web of emotions and ambitions that had brought them together. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Sophie. "We need to talk. About Michael, about the exhibition, about everything. Meet me at the Pierre tomorrow at noon. Come alone." Catherine stared at the message, her heart racing. Sophie had all the power, the money, the social standing, the legal claim to Michael. What could she possibly want to discuss? As she drifted off to sleep, her last thoughts were of her paintings waiting at Lumière. They were pieces of her soul, created during the height of her love for Michael. Now they felt like hostages in a war she never meant to fight. What she didn't know was that both Michael and Sophie were keeping secrets that would soon explode into the open. The next 24 hours would change everything, forcing all of them to decide what they were truly willing to risk for love, art, and ambition. The Pierre's tea room dripped with old-world luxury. Catherine felt Sophie's choice of venue was deliberate, another reminder of the world she'd never truly belonged to. But when Sophie swept in, her usual polish was noticeably cracked. Her designer dress seemed rumpled, her eyes ringed with concealer that couldn't quite hide her exhaustion. "He's ruining everything," Sophie said without preamble, sliding into the chair across from Catherine. "And somehow, it's all your fault." Catherine kept her voice steady. "I haven't spoken to Michael in weeks." "No, but he's speaking about you. To my father, to the board, to anyone who'll listen." Sophie's hands shook as she poured tea. "He's threatening to expose everything, the gallery's financial problems, Daddy's tax schemes, all of it. Unless... Unless what? Unless I release him from the engagement." Sophie's laugh was bitter. "As if I'm the one holding him prisoner. You have no idea what you've done, do you? The careful plans you've destroyed." Before Catherine could respond, her phone lit up with a message from Jason: found something interesting about Lumiere's finances. Call me when you can. Sophie caught the name on the screen. Jason Reed? The photographer. Her expression shifted from anger to calculation. Well, isn't that interesting? Did Michael tell you who funded your exhibition after our family pulled out? Catherine's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? When Michael refused to sign the prenup last week, Daddy withdrew all support from Lumiere, including your exhibition budget. But instead of canceling, Michael scrambled to find new funding. He sold his Hamptons house, liquidated his stock portfolio. Sophie's smile was cruel. He's bankrupting himself to keep your dream alive. Romantic, isn't it? And completely stupid. Catherine felt the room spin. She'd been avoiding the gallery, refusing Michael's calls, trying to move forward. All while he was sacrificing everything he'd built. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand what you're destroying. Sophie leaned forward. Michael and I made sense. Our families, our connections, our world, it all fit. Then you came along with your talent and your passion and your complete disregard for how things work in our circle. You made him want something real. Do you know how dangerous that is? Catherine stood abruptly. I need to go. He's at the gallery, Sophie called after her. But remember, sometimes love isn't enough to bridge two different worlds. The taxi ride to Lumiere felt endless. Catherine's mind raced through every interaction, every moment she'd dismissed as manipulation. Had she been wrong about Michael's motivations? Or was this another elaborate game? She found him in his office, surrounded by papers. The polished executive she'd first met was gone, replaced by a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw her, his eyes lit up with a hope that made her heart ache. You came, he said simply. Is it true? She demanded. About the exhibition funding? Michael ran a hand through his disheveled hair. You weren't supposed to find out. Not until after the opening. Why would you do that? Your house, your investments. Because I've spent my whole life building a perfect facade. He stood, moving toward her. The right connections, the right marriage, the right image. Then you walked into my gallery with your brutal honesty on canvas, and suddenly none of it mattered anymore. But Sophie, her family. I met with her father yesterday. Told him I wouldn't sign the prenup, wouldn't play along with their tax schemes, wouldn't be their puppet anymore. His laugh was hollow. He threatened to destroy me. Maybe he will. But I'm done letting fear of losing everything stop me from having anything real. Catherine felt tears burning her eyes. You should have told me. Would you have let me do it? He stepped closer. You're so fiercely independent, Kat. The moment you found out I was funding the exhibition, you would have shut it down. But these paintings, they're your soul on canvas. They deserve to be seen. Not at the cost of everything you've built. I built a prison, he said softly. You showed me how to break free. He reached for her, but Catherine backed away. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Jason. The reminder of his simple, authentic world made her head spin. I need time, she whispered. This is too much. I understand. Michael's voice was resigned. But Kat. The exhibition opens in 2 weeks. Whatever you decide about us, don't let Sophie's family steal your moment. I've arranged everything through shell companies. They can't touch it. As Catherine fled the gallery, her mind was chaos. Michael had sacrificed everything for her art, for her. But Jason's message about Lumiere's finances nagged at her. What had he discovered? And more importantly, why did the thought of choosing between these two men, one who'd moved heaven and earth for her, and one who offered peaceful authenticity, feel like being torn in half? What she didn't know was that both Michael's sacrifice and Jason's discovery were pieces of a larger puzzle. The real test of love, trust, and authenticity was still to come, and it would force Catherine to decide not just between two men, but between two versions of herself. The days before the exhibition opening became a blur of emotional chaos for Catherine. She threw herself into the final preparations, working late into the night at her studio, trying to quiet the storm in her mind. But every brushstroke reminded her of her dilemma, Michael's grand gesture of sacrifice competing with Jason's promise of uncomplicated authenticity. When Jason finally showed up at her studio 3 nights before the opening, his expression was grave. "I've been doing some digging," he said, laying out a folder of documents. "About Lumiere's finances." Catherine stared at the papers spread across her work table. Bank statements, property records, corporate filings, a paper trail that told a story she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. "Michael didn't just sell his house and stocks," Jason explained, pointing to various documents. "He leveraged everything he owned, took out loans against the gallery's assets. He's not just risking his wealth, he's betting the entire gallery on your exhibition." "Why are you showing me this?" Catherine asked, though she already knew the answer. Jason's eyes were gentle. "Because you need to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just about love or art anymore. The pressure he's putting on you, on your work." "He's not pressuring me," Catherine interrupted. "He didn't even want me to know." "Exactly." Jason ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "He's making these massive decisions that affect your career, your future, without even consulting you. Is that really so different from what Sophie's family was doing to him?" The question hit home harder than Jason probably intended. Catherine sank onto her paint-stained couch, mind racing. "I need to talk to him." "Cat." Jason sat beside her, close but not touching. "I've seen this before. The art world is full of grand gestures and dramatic sacrifices. But real love? It's built on honesty, on partnership, on letting each other grow without trying to control the outcome." She turned to look at him, really look at him. Jason represented everything that had drawn her to art in the first place: authenticity, creative freedom, the courage to live simply but truthfully. Being with him would be easy, natural. No complex webs of finance and society, no dramatic sacrifices, just two artists supporting each other's vision. "You're falling for me," she said softly. It wasn't a question. Yes. His honesty was refreshing after months of complicated lies. "But that's not why I'm showing you this. You deserve to make this choice with all the facts. And if I choose him, then I'll be at your exhibition opening, celebrating your success as a friend." He smiled, though she could see the cost of those words. "Your work deserves to be seen, Kat. I just hope you don't lose yourself in the process." After Jason left, Catherine spent hours staring at her paintings. Each canvas told a story of her journey with Michael, the passion, the pain, the betrayal, and now this overwhelming gesture of sacrifice. But was Jason right? Was Michael's grand gesture just another form of control? Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael: "The gallery's ready. Come see." Catherine found herself moving before she could second-guess the decision. The night air was crisp as she walked the familiar path to Lumiere. The gallery windows glowed invitingly, and through the glass, she could see her paintings arranged exactly as she'd envisioned them months ago when this space had felt like home. Michael was adjusting the lighting on her centerpiece, the woman drowning in golden chains, now transformed. In the final version, the chains were breaking, turning to butterflies as they shattered. "You changed it," he said without turning around. "The ending is different now. Everything's different now." Catherine moved to stand beside him. "Jason showed me the financial records." Michael's shoulders tensed, but he didn't deny anything. "Would you have preferred I let them shut down your exhibition?" "I would have preferred the truth." "Partners tell each other the truth, Michael." "Partners?" He turned to her then, hope and fear warring in his expression. "Is that what you want us to be?" Before she could answer, her phone lit up with an incoming call from Sophie. Catherine stared at the screen, remembering Sophie's words at the Pierre, "Sometimes love isn't enough to bridge two different worlds." But as she looked around the gallery, at her art displayed exactly as she'd dreamed, at Michael waiting for her answer with his heart in his eyes, she wondered if perhaps love wasn't about bridging different worlds at all. Maybe it was about having the courage to build a new world together. Her finger hovered over the phone screen. The choice she made in the next moment would determine not just her romantic future, but her artistic one as well. Sophie's call represented the last thread of the old world, with all its sophisticated manipulation and carefully maintained appearances. Michael stood before her, stripped of his wealth and status, offering nothing but his heart and his faith in her talent. And somewhere in Brooklyn, Jason was probably in his darkroom, creating honest art without drama or compromise. 3 paths stretched before her, each with its own kind of love, its own kind of freedom, its own kind of sacrifice. The phone kept ringing as Catherine prepared to make the choice that would change everything. The opening night of Catherine's exhibition hummed with anticipation. New York's art elite mingled with downtown creatives, creating an unusual energy in Lumiere's elegant space. Her paintings lined the walls, a chronicle of love, betrayal, and transformation that had become more autobiographical than she'd ever intended. Catherine stood in the gallery's back office, her black dress feeling both like armor and a second skin. Sophie's call from 2 nights ago still echoed in her mind, the final revelation that had changed everything. "Michael didn't just break off our engagement," Sophie had said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "He went to my father with proof of their tax fraud. He's using it as leverage to protect the gallery, and you. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know what kind of man you're choosing." Sophie's laugh was hollow. "He's not the polished society puppet I thought I was marrying. He's someone who would burn down his whole world for what he believes in. I almost admire that." Now, watching the crowd through the office window, Catherine saw Michael working the room with his usual charm. But there was something different about him, a lightness, as if shedding his golden handcuffs had freed more than just his finances. A knock at the office door pulled her from her thoughts. Jason stood there, camera in hand, looking sharp but distinctly out of place in his one good suit. "Quite a turnout," he said, stepping inside. "The art world's finest, here to see the woman who turned their perfect world upside down." Catherine smiled. "Thank you for coming. And for everything else. I'm not just here as your friend." He held up his camera. "The voice wants a full feature. Love and revolution in the New York art scene. What do you think?" "I think." Catherine paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think sometimes revolution looks like burning everything down, and sometimes it looks like building something new from the ashes." Jason studied her for a long moment. "You're choosing him." "I'm choosing us," she corrected. "The real us, not the convenient fiction or the safe alternative." Michael risked everything to break free of a world built on appearances. How could I do any less? And the gallery? The pressure of his sacrifice? "We're restructuring Lumiere," Catherine said. "Making it a true partnership, with space for both established artists and emerging voices. No more games, no more compromises with corrupt investors." "It won't be easy," Jason warned. "The best art never is." She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Your friendship helped me remember who I am. I'll always be grateful for that." The gallery lights dimmed slightly, the signal that the official opening was about to begin. Catherine took a deep breath, smoothing her dress. "Ready to face your public?" Jason asked, raising his camera. "More than ready." She stepped into the main gallery just as Michael began his introduction. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and in that moment, Catherine saw their whole future unfold, the struggles ahead, the joy of creating something authentic together, the satisfaction of proving that love could be both passionate and honest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael was saying, I'm honored to present an artist who taught me that true beauty lies not in perfection, but in the courage to break free from it. Catherine Chen. The crowd applauded as Catherine moved to join him. She saw Sophie at the back of the room, watching with an unreadable expression. But there was no victory or defeat in this moment, only the quiet recognition that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted opens the door to everything you really need. Michael's hand found hers as they faced their guests together. The gesture was simple, natural, no performance, no calculation. Just two people who had stripped away every facade to find something real. Ready to change the art world, he whispered. Catherine looked around the gallery, at her paintings that documented this very journey, at Jason capturing the moment through his lens, at the mixed crowd that represented the bridge between two worlds she'd once thought incompatible. We already have, she replied. In the years that followed, the story of that night would become legend in New York art circles, how love had transformed not just two people, but an entire gallery's philosophy. Lumiere became known for showcasing both polished masters and raw new talents, with Catherine and Michael's partnership proving that authenticity and success weren't mutually exclusive. And if sometimes, late at night in their rebuilt world, Catherine thought about the different paths she might have taken, the safe harbor Jason had offered, the conventional success Sophie had represented, she never regretted her choice. She had learned that real love, like true art, requires the courage to break boundaries, take risks, and trust that what emerges from the chaos will be more beautiful than anything you could have planned. Her final painting of the exhibition, The Woman Breaking Free from Golden Chains, hung in their home as a reminder. Not all prisons are built of steel and stone. Sometimes they're built of expectations, fears, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we're supposed to be. But with enough courage, and the right partner, even the strongest chains can become wings.